Welcome to my review of Horizon Shift 81. And I believe this is on a few platforms. I'm playing it on PS4 in this video. And you'll see the video quality is pretty shitty initially. This was the last time that I was uploading from the PS5 directly to YouTube. After this game, I stopped doing that because I realized that the compression is so fucking bad. It really makes the video quality shitty. So I've been transferring all my footage now directly to a hard drive off the PS5, and then from the hard drive to the PC, and that's helped a lot. So later in the video, maybe about halfway, you'll see the video quality improve drastically. And you'll also notice that I disable the background graphics near the end of the video, and I do recommend doing that as the first thing you do. Go into the options and disable all the background graphics because they're super fucking distracting and they really blend against the bullets and other shit. And I had a lot of deaths because of that before I realized I could shut that off. So that's my first recommendation to make the game easier from the start, is just disable the background graphics. And you'll see me do that later. So aside from that, this is definitely one that I'm going to review. This turned out to be a great fucking single-screen game. One of the best single-screen games that I played. It's in that old arcade style, but it uses a lot of, ideas from games that have come since then, with the dashing and invincibility frames from dashing and things like that, which you wouldn't have had in, old games like Galaga. As gaming was still pretty new at that point, but this is much better than any of those games were at the time. So what I did was I actually used I have a scuff controller that I use. I use the back paddles for dashing, but that's overkill. All you really need to do is you'll have your dashes set to I believe it's the top bumpers on the PS4 or PS5 controller. So that works fine. But basically, whenever you do a dash, you have your left dash and your right dash on the top bumpers. And, of course, it correlates with the side that the bumpers are on the controller. But it gives you some invincibility frames, and you can dash to kill enemies. So you can dash into regular enemies to kill them. And you can also dash through bullets. And it'll give you invincibility. So if you need to dodge, that's the way to do it. Oftentimes, but you do have to wait for the dash to charge back up. There is a meter above your ship, so make sure you have enough in the meter. If you try to spam the dash button, obviously you'll end up dying. So aside from that, you can switch sides at any time on the line. It's kind of like, why the game is called Horizon Shift is because you can switch between planes at any time by pressing up and down. So depending what side of the line you're on, it depends if you can take damage. So if you're on, say, now it doesn't always let you switch sides. Like for the boss fights, I believe it's always fixed which side you're on, like you see here. And this game, it starts out very easy, so not much to say about the gameplay as of yet. But when you are on, a side of the line, you can't take damage from the opposing side unless it's a projectile that goes through the line. There are a few projectiles from certain enemy types that can go through the line or that can break parts of the line off. When the line gets broken off, then you'll have to jump or just avoid the line until it regenerates, and just wait. So those are some options you have. You can also jump and dash across the line to the safe side where there's no holes. So things like that. But you do have to be aware of that, and you'll get used to what enemies can shoot through the line. Like, see that bullet just went through the line? Some of them will. So you got to get used to what enemy types can do that. And the game is just going to escalate in difficulty and test all your knowledge of all the enemy patterns, basically, like a lot of old arcade games do. But it does so in a really, really good pacing. It does it pretty gradually. The final checkpoint is very, very hard, so it is definitely, it challenges you at the end of the game. But instead of trying to narrate movement for movement, I'm going to try to give general tips and things that I found useful. And, from the start, one big thing, like I said, was disabling those fucking background graphics that you see here because they really make the screen messy. So generally, like with those saw blades that are approaching, you want to try to take out enemies before they reach that line. You know, the more enemies you can take out, the less bullshit you have to deal with, you know, that's going to, you know, hit you. So it is one-hit deaths, and you get a few lives. You don't earn any one-ups from points, but you do get a few lives. But you have to get to the next checkpoint. Getting to the next checkpoint requires you to beat about 5 stages, I believe. And that will be the next checkpoint. Anytime you get to a boss, you also get a checkpoint, but that's usually after a 5-stage chunk. So you want those checkpoints, definitely. And basically, you know, you have a few lives, but, you know, you do respawn right where you died, but if you waste all your lives, you will have to start back at the last checkpoint, which could be 5 stages back, depending where you died at. So you have to survive for a while sometimes. I think the last stretch of the game might be something like 9 minutes or something, and it's a dense stretch. But you do learn it and memorize it, but it's tough. It's definitely challenging. There's power-ups, so getting this shield gives you an extra hit. So always get that when you can. You want to get things like satellite and turret. Those give you extra shots, so you can do extra damage. There's another really good item. I believe it's called reverse. I think it's a reverse shot. It shoots behind you. That's really useful because it allows you to shoot, you know, the top part of the screen and the bottom of the screen at once without having to go on the other side of the line. So it gives you some extra range to cause some more problems, you know, clear out some more shit. You always want to try to clear out what you can. You really don't want to let shit build up too much. There are certain enemies that drop spikes, and the only way to destroy the spikes is to dash through them. But you can also just jump over them. So those are 2 ways to deal with the spikes. But, you know, if you're not paying attention to certain parts of the screen, the spikes can creep up on you. So you do want to get used to that. You can also rescue these floating people if you want. But there's really no point if you're just trying to beat the game because you don't get extra lives from points anyway. So I've never gotten a 1-up by rescuing them. And of course, my tutorial is just what I did to beat the game, you know, adding commentary to what I did. There's a lot of different types of guns that you may want to experiment with. The flame is not my favorite because it makes your ship move slower. And it's supposed to be more powerful, I believe, but it really doesn't feel more powerful when I look at the boss's health bar compared to some of the other weapons that don't seem like power weapons. So I don't find any of the weapons to be significantly more powerful against bosses. Though when it comes to regular enemies and some enemies that take multiple hits, like the asteroids take multiple hits, and you want to clear them out, sometimes the power weapons like the flamer and the laser seem good for that. But I think my favorite overall weapon is the blitz. And that's basically just like a spread shot that covers pretty much the whole width of the screen. It's not super powerful, but it clears out a lot of shit. And it's great for survivability, you know, just keeping you alive, which is the main thing that you want to do in this game. You know, you don't really want to brute force it because there's a lot of shit on screen. So it's better really to have a more reliable weapon, I think, to survive longer. That's what helped me in the final stretch of the game was having that blitz shot. I lasted for a while with that. And, of course, just memorizing the layout of the stages and shit. Of course, I did have to learn that. That last checkpoint took me a while. It probably took me a few hours, if I have to guess. The full game, I think the full game may have taken me over 4 hours. I didn't double check. But it did take me a while. But yeah, this boss is pretty simple, just like the first boss. It's just staying between the bullets and dodging and just taking it out. Really not much to explain with that. The game's not going to get harder until a little bit later. And actually, I'll double check now and see what my completion time was, because I forgot to even check that. I usually give that in my my tutorials to give an idea. You know, those who follow my videos may be able to get some idea how hard the game is based on all the completion times, since I list pretty much completion times for every game that I beat on the channel. Let me see. Yeah, it was around 4 hours and 35 minutes. So it was a pretty difficult game for, you know, how short it is when you know what to do. I think this is the only complete playthrough of the game on YouTube. I couldn't find any, so I was kind of on my own when it came to seeing what was coming up near the end of the game. I think I saw a video that covered the bosses, but I haven't seen any video that covers all the stages and bosses, full playthrough. So now with these asteroids, you see how good this blitz shot is for taking out those asteroids? It really clears them out. And see, now I got a shittier gun. It's really not nearly as good. You can also see I have that satellite that orbits around me and shoots shit. Those are useful as well. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but it all adds up, and it will help clear out some of the Scraggler enemies, which can easily blindside you. So with these lasers, you can't destroy these UFOs that shoot the lasers. You just have to avoid the lasers. So just be aware that they're going to fire a laser. Try to destroy the asteroids, because the asteroids will actually break the line. And once you have holes in the line, it's easier to fall through. Now you can save yourself. If you do fall through a hole in the line, you can save yourself by reversing gravity midair. Just make sure you land back on a part of the line that doesn't have a hole in it, obviously, when you reverse gravity. So that is a way to save yourself. If you do fall through a hole, just reverse gravity. Hit the opposite direction. It's either up or down, depending what side you're on. So you can save yourself. And all these little general tips are what's going to help you, in the end. There's not really a step-by-step guide that I can give, but you're going to be fighting the same enemies and shit, just more of them and in more difficult configurations, basically. So, gradually you're going to learn how to deal with all the enemies in different numbers and different combinations. So yeah, now you have the spikes. So, use the dash to get through the spikes or jump. I use dash often because jumping always is a little bit more dangerous since it brings you closer to the top or bottom of the screen where there might be more enemies. So I like to stay against the line as much as possible most of the time. But yeah, definitely experiment with the different weapons and see what you like. But I ended up thinking that the Blitz was the best weapon overall. I kind of came to that decision at the end of the game when I finally beat it. So now you have a breakout style sequence where basically you're just bouncing that ball around to break the blocks. And then when there's a bomb that appears, you have to dash into the bomb. And by dashing into the bomb, I think that shoots the bomb up and destroys part of the stage that you need to destroy. I think you have to dash into a few bombs to beat the stage, if I remember right. So, bounce the ball around for a while, but when the bomb thing appears, dash into it. I don't know if that's required, but it does seem to help. So you probably want to dash into the bombs. Or if it doesn't, if it's not required, it'll at least get the bomb out of your way, so it's probably useful. I did beat this some weeks ago, so, and that part was a while ago, because I took a lot of breaks while playing, so I was on and off when I played the game, so the last time I played that part was a while ago, so I don't remember exactly. So now you have another boss. Keep in mind, you also have a screen-clearing bomb that takes a while to charge up, but when it's full, when that meter at the bottom is full and says ready, hit triangle to use your bomb. They do take a while to build up, so I like to use them when I'm either just about to die, or, if I'm on a boss, I may waste it up, especially if the boss is not that hard, because it'll do some decent boss damage, I believe. But the main use is to clear the screen. It's good for when there's a ton of shit on screen, tons of enemies and bullets, and if you think you're going to die, it's good to save it up for those emergencies. That way you'll survive longer. If you just use it when you don't need it, it's a waste, because you could have just cleared out the enemies normally. And it takes a long time to regenerate. I believe it is generated by damaging enemies. But yeah, keep dashing the spikes and try to clear out what you can. But of course, the UFOs you can't clear out. So you just got to be ready for them, just avoid them. You see, you can kind of jump in midair when you fall through the hole. So you do have some control of that. The centipedes you want to try to destroy because the centipedes will break a hole in the line. So if you're not going to destroy the centipede fully, just be aware that it is going to crash in a part of that line and it's going to make a hole. The holes do generate, though. They regenerate after a little while. So it's not permanent. So at this point, I was still pretty much cruising through these early stages, I believe. I don't remember it getting hard until later. But this is another boss. There are a few other modes too, but as you saw in the beginning, I believe this was the classic arcade mode or something like that, but it shows in the beginning, I believe. I think this is the main mode. This is really still pretty easy, I would say, by shooter standards, just staying, in the gaps pretty much and just keep shooting. Just about any weapon will work, well. Some of the weapons I don't like that much, like the, I think there's a blast weapon that shoots these balls that explode on shit, and it's really slow. That's one of my least favorite weapons. But you may find that you like certain weapons that I didn't like. So DJ is double jump, which is not really that useful. There's not many instances where you really need to double jump over shit. There's also a double dash, which I think it lets you dash twice in a row without waiting for it to recharge. That may be good, but I didn't find myself using that too much either. But it's worth getting, if you can pick it up, just get it. But it's probably not going to make much of a difference. The good thing is you get a checkpoint at all the boss fights. So, you get 2 or 3 default lives to fight the boss every time. So if you do use a continue, it doesn't matter. You got unlimited continues, and with all your lives, it makes the bosses a lot easier. Even the final boss, I didn't end up getting hit at all. It was very, very easy. I mean, I think I died on it once or twice, but when I beat it, I didn't lose any lives. It was pretty easy, especially compared to how hard the final stretch of the game was. The final boss was relatively very, very easy. So now, this is going to be pretty far into the game. I think there might be something like 36 or 37 stages. Maybe 37, but I don't remember exactly, but we'll see at the end. So now you start off with a new type of attack. Whenever you see these X's on screen, you see those 4 X's spinning in the corners. Whenever you see those on screen, it means you cannot destroy them, and it means that they're going to make a bunch of lasers in the screen. So you're going to see a grid appear, and that's going to give you a very quick warning of where they're going to appear. So you do have about a second or two to figure out where you're going to position yourself. I usually like to stay in the middle of the screen for a lot of them, but be careful about jumping or moving too far to the edge. You can actually dash within those squares. You can do a full dash, but you got to get your distancing just right, so that's a skill that you'll have to acquire with the positioning. But it is useful to be able to dash within those squares because, at times there's going to be enemies and shit inside the square with you and bullets that you're going to want to clear out. So either try to position yourself so that you're, far enough away from them or, learn to use your dash in there, and that will help. So now we have some bigger enemies that take more shots. And they do shoot bullets that pass through the line, so those guys are pretty dangerous, especially when you combine them with these laser grids. And now you got some spikes coming in, so it's starting to, they're starting to mix up more attacks. You got the centipedes coming in, which are going to break the line. So they're starting to test you a little bit more. So it definitely starts to get more challenging at this point. But I have a shield as well, and I have some satellites and stuff which help. You see, I was a little sloppy with my dash there, and I killed my shield by dashing into the grid when it was when all the lasers were lit up. So I said, fuck it, I used my bomb here. So this is that weapon I was talking about with the exploding fucking balls. I mean, it's pretty fucking slow. I guess it does some more damage, but I really don't like that weapon too much. At this stage in the game, I was kind of just picking up whatever the fuck appeared. I wasn't super careful about what weapons I got. I had to refine that later because the game got tough near the final checkpoint. And even before that, the game was getting more challenging from what I remember. But the final checkpoint was the one that took me the longest. And you'll see that later. So yeah, get those shields whenever you can. There may be a 1-up pickup that's super fucking rare as well, if I remember right. I think sometimes you can pick up a 1-up. But I think the pickups are random, and I think that one is really fucking rare. I'm not even, it happens so infrequently. I'm not even sure if it was in this game. So, I think there is a 1-up pickup. But don't wait around for it, because you probably won't get it much at all. But sometimes you do get better runs, kind of similar to God Hand. It's like when you're breaking open all the crates trying to get, roulette pickups and shit like that to power up. Sometimes the sections are easier because you get a bunch of great pickups and shit and great power-ups. And this game is similar like that. You do get different, you'll get different items that float to you in each new attempt. So, it may change the flow of your attempt. It can really change how you end up doing. Though the pickups in the final checkpoint, they didn't really make a huge difference because I really had to learn the layout of those stages. Because the shield would go really fast anyway, so it didn't make a huge difference, but it definitely can help. This is definitely one I'll review. I like I said, I really like this fucking game. There's actually a first game in the series, but I could not get the controls to work. I may have to map a keyboard to a controller. It's on PC. But this one definitely seems like the better entry. So Divert is actually really good too. That's what I have now. I have the Divert shot. What that does, it moves in the direction that you move your ship. So you got to kind of zigzag your ship around to get good coverage of the screen. If you want to cover everything on screen, you got to keep hitting left and right, alternating to wave it around and get good coverage of the screen. But it is really good if you do that, and it has a good, powerful straight shot as well. So it's a pretty good weapon, but it does require more aggressive playing with left and right movement. So be aware of that. You see how fast it kills the asteroids, though, which is hugely useful because they won't break part of the line. And when there's a lot of them, you don't want to really, lose too much of the line. I also have the reverse shot, which is very useful. It's a weak stream of shots, but it gives you an extra shot behind you, which will help you clear out some bullshit. So it's just an extra tool that is very helpful. The grids get complicated here at this part of the game. This is where the grids start to get more difficult. And it does continue later into the game, but now they're starting to test you more with it, and you have to watch your positioning more. So it is starting to get tougher with that. Sometimes with the grids will move upward or down, and the only way to avoid them sometimes is to jump while you're inside those squares. So be aware of that. If it gets too close, you can jump, and that may buy you enough time for the lasers to disappear. So now we have another boss. I think this is the hardest boss so far from what I'm seeing here. Mainly want to stay in the gaps and just keep shooting. Remember, you can take out the missiles with your shots, so do that. You can't take out the wider projectiles, but you can if you dash into them, I believe, but not with your gun. So just take out the missiles. It does help to shoot the missiles out. So when this guy gets close, obviously don't be right under him. Maybe in the middle. You might be safe in the middle between his legs. But yeah, I mean that may be the only safe spot. And then if that's the case, it would allow you to damage him at the same time, too, instead of going off to the side. So it might be good to do that. You see this one is mixing up with more patterns and shit like that. Definitely denser bullet patterns. Remember to be aware of your dash meter and to be ready to use that if you need it. If you're unable to stay in the gaps, use that to clear out shit, bullets and enemies. With these circular saw things, whenever they latch onto that line at the bottom where you're at, you can clear out a bunch of them in a row, and it's a better, more efficient use of your dash to take out 3 or 4 of them in one dash than to try to take out one at a time and waste your dash. So try to line them up if you can, take out multiple at once. This fight can go on for a while, and it's definitely pretty challenging compared to the other boss fights. But if you clear out the missiles and stay in the gaps, it's really not too bad. Just pay attention to when the ship is going to crush down to the bottom, or in this case, the top. It's getting a little dangerous. I don't think I lost a life here yet, so this was going pretty well. And I still had a bomb, too, that I could have used. But I figured I'd save it up. I don't know if I ended up using it. That's always an option, though. The bombs, can be useful. But I would save the bomb for when you're about to get hit. If the patterns are getting too dense and you think you're going to take a hit, use the bomb. It'll give you some breathing room. If you just waste it, then, you won't have a defensive option if you need it. It's good as a defensive measure to keep yourself alive. So now you see a big change in the video quality, right? Better color, way sharper. That's because there's no compression bullshit now. I'm uploading it to the hard drive now at this point, I believe. So it does look a lot better. But, I wasn't going to replay the game to get sharper footage, especially for a game like this. There's really no point to redo it. Now, you'll see I still haven't disabled the backgrounds yet. But I will do that near the end of the game. So you will see that. And I recommend doing that from the very beginning. They don't... the backgrounds are not giving you anything good, except for making it hard to see the bullets and the enemies. So definitely disable them. Unless you like that shit. Personally, I hate shit like that obscures bullets and shit like that. Very irritating. I played most of the game with it on, but I would have shut it off. So you can see it's already getting much harder by this point. That last boss was a lot harder. And you can see the spike in difficulty here with all the density on screen. So the game is definitely spiking up at this point. So, you really are going to have to learn the layouts to the stages. And there's really no, one tip that I can give, I wouldn't be able to give movement by movement advice, it's just about recognizing the patterns of all the different enemy types and then being able to adapt on the fly when all of them are out at once, to be able to just deal with it all at once by, just being aware of all the different patterns and just being able to put it all together. If you just try to huddle in a corner and just, avoid bullets and shit like that, it's really not going to be good enough because you're going to get cornered and killed. So you really have to be aware of everything going on. And like usual with these games, you want to try to be a few steps ahead of what's going on screen, to be at least a few steps ahead so that if one option fails, you have another safe spot to move to or another backup plan. Like, all right, well, if you're about to get cornered, you have a dash ready at all times. So, that's one easy way to have a defensive option ready. Always have a dash ready. So, if you're about to get cornered, all right, I'm going to dash here and land here. Try to plan a little bit ahead. And that's going to make a big difference than if you're just, in the moment with no plan, You try to think ahead whenever possible. I think that's one of the best and most important strategies for these kind of games. So see, the Flamer, it's really, I guess it has decent power against regular enemies, but it makes your ship move so much slower, just like the laser does. And I really don't like either one of those weapons for that reason. I like having my full speed. And I really like that Blitz weapon. I think that's overall the best weapon. At least for me. I think it's pretty much good for any situation in the game. It does well on bosses. It can hit bosses at, no matter where they are on the screen, it'll hit them. See, the Blitzer. That's my favorite weapon. Because you're damaging everything on screen. Pretty much, that's in front of you anyway. But if you have that reverse shot, at least you get an extra stream behind you. But yeah, a lot of this game is learning how to prioritize what you should be, focusing on. For example, you don't really need to. You don't always need to try to take out enemies on both sides of the screen. You can stay on one side of the line often. You just have to be aware of what enemies are going to be able to punch through that line and break it, and which projectiles will go through the line and kill you. You got to be aware of all that. As long as you know that, then you can identify which enemies are going to be a threat, which ones are going to break through the line. Now, sometimes you'll be aware that, look, there's no enemies that can break through the line on this wave. So, if that's the case, which it definitely is the case, earlier on in the game. Though later on it does get more to the point where, there's usually enemies that can do that. and break through the line. But as long as you can identify them and you're paying attention, then you'll be aware of what side of the line to stay on. You won't waste energy spending too much time on the other side trying to clear out the enemies when you really don't need to clear them out. You really only need to clear out the enemies that are going to be a threat to you, on your side of the line. And just be aware of the ones that can break through the line. It's kind of about conserving your energy, not wasting energy trying to take out shit that you really don't need to take out. Combine that with being a few steps ahead of what's going on. Such as, simple technique like having a dodge ready if you need it. Or if you have the bomb charged up, having that ready when you get overwhelmed by too much shit on screen. It's also good to use the bomb when there's a lot of enemies and projectiles on screen, instead of using it to dodge, a single bullet or something like that. But it's better to use the bomb than to lose a life. So now you have a lot of these grids that are appearing. So this is where it starts to get tough with the grids, because they do lock you into a very narrow part of the screen. So you don't have a lot of movement options when you're trapped in these little squares. So learning how to dash within the square is definitely helpful, like I said. If you can do a full dash inside the square, you'll have an extra option if you need it. Remember, you can also dash through the lines and through the lasers because you have invincibility frames. So you can also use the dash to get through the lasers and get into another square or get away. You can do that as well if you need to move. Just don't try to move normally through them, otherwise, obviously you'll die. But there are a lot of little options like that. But you can see movement does get a lot tighter. The game starts to really try to confine you to small spaces, and it tries to really, corner you in with bullets and enemies. So you really do have to be thinking ahead at this point in the game. And since you can't destroy those spinning X's in the corners, you just have to deal with the laser grids and just position yourself. But now at stage 30, we have the next boss fight and the next checkpoint. You can see with editing, I just edited it to the next checkpoint. Instead of showing, wasting a whole fucking continue, you already know that I lost continue since I said, it took me 4.5 hours to beat the game. So there's really no need to see all that, since this is a demonstration video to show my successful attempts. But yeah, I wasted continues pretty frequently, unlimited continues. But I did use continues pretty frequently towards the later part of the game. I probably failed most of the waves at least a few times. The early ones, I think I was able to cruise for a little while in the very early parts of the game, but it does ramp up quite a bit. Just be aware of the trajectory of this, rotating saw boss. Obviously don't be on the, just stay away from it. Don't let it hit you. It's pretty easy to predict. And you do have some bullets. They're getting a little dense, but I still don't think they're as hard as that last boss that we dealt with. The tricky part about this boss, though, is that the lasers do confine you, and there's a lot of lasers at some point that you can only move through them with your dash, so just be aware of that. That is what makes this boss a little bit challenging, because it really confines you, but just try to take out those missiles, and it shouldn't be too bad to stay between all the other bullets. Dash if you need to clear out bullets, or if you're about to get hit. But again, if you die on this, it's a checkpoint. You have your full stack of lives to try it again. So this should be easier than the shit that you've already dealt with. You've already beaten a much harder boss in the prior fight. So I don't think this will give too much trouble. Yeah, the concept is really fucking cool in this game, though. It's something that should have been done sooner. I haven't really seen this done in a game before. Definitely a unique idea, and it's extremely well executed. I don't know if the first game was like really, really good, but this one is fucking great. And it was a pretty cheap game too, so I definitely recommend it. I'm definitely going to do a review on it. So obviously you can use the reverse shot to attack it too if you have that. But you're going to do more damage if you just face it with your main weapon, if you want to do extra damage. But it's really not a big deal. It's better to just Play patient, just stay in between the bullets. I mean, it's easy enough to dodge, I think. So you don't have to be really super aggressive with it and try to take it out fast. Any weapon should be good enough, though I would avoid the laser and the flamer weapons because they slow your ship down a lot, which I don't like. This weapon I don't really like, as I said, but I mean, it's good enough for the boss fights. It's not great when there's a lot of enemies because it really doesn't have a lot of screen clearance. So yeah, I show restart from checkpoint just to be clear on that I use the continue. One of my unlimited continues. Now you see I changed the side panels as well in the menu. And I removed the backgrounds. The reason I changed the side panel was because the background I had some black in it, and it can make it hard to see where the screen ends. You know, on an OLED TV, blacks are pretty much like the TV is off. You can't distinguish them from if the TV is off, so it all blends in. So the color on the sides does give it a little bit more, you can see the barrier easier on the sides of the vertical screen, you know. And I removed the backgrounds completely. If you play the game, you'll really notice it's a huge improvement as far as gameplay. And you can probably see it here. That now you don't have to worry about all that bullshit floating around in the background. I died a lot because of that. So, you know, go in the options and just, you know, remove the backgrounds. And you may want to use this side art as well. You know, especially if you're playing on an OLED where the black it blends into the TV. I'm sitting about 5 feet from a 65-inch display, so a lot of times I can't see the sides of the screen without turning my head. So for some games, that's a big issue. With this one, it wasn't too bad because it's such a narrow play area, you know, since it's a little vertical space. It's kind of a, well, it's almost, it looks like a, you know, it looks like a vertical widescreen, basically. So yeah, this is actually, I think this is the final sections of the game. This is the hardest checkpoint of the game and the final checkpoint before the final boss. The final boss is the final checkpoint, but this is the last series of stages before the final boss. So this is going to be the hardest part of the game. So you're really going to have to memorize what's coming up, and you're also going to be, you know, reacting as well. It's going to be a combination. And this part took me a few hours, so this took me probably a good chunk of the entire game playthrough. This one series of stages. I think it's 5 stages like usual, but it's a tough 5 stages. It goes on for about 9 or 10 minutes, I think. See, those centipedes and other shit can really clear out that line and leave you with a very small space to stay on. But for the most part, as long as you're paying attention, you should have enough area to stay on, even if the line gets destroyed here. But try to take out the centipedes. See, I got that blitz weapon that ended up being my favorite weapon, and that was the main one I ended up using by this point in the game. But you do have to do some careful maneuvering here, as you see. You got a lot to deal with, and it's easy to fall in the holes. If you can take out the asteroids, do it, but you can see things are getting really tight at this point. And that's just going to take learning playing and learning it. You're just going to have to get used to the layout of the stages. It's always the same as far as all the enemies that spawn in and everything that appears, aside from the randomized power-ups. But everything else is always the same. So after a while, you will know what's coming up. Especially after you die on this for a few hours. But it's pretty much going to be testing your skill, from everything else at this point, all the enemy types. I don't think there's really any new enemy types here, but it's just going to combine everything in very difficult ways. Make sure you pay attention to the spikes that are being dropped down. Get the shield whenever you can. The missiles you can clear out, and if you have that wide shot, like if you can get this blitz shot, I recommend it because it clears out the missiles really well and the enemies. And you don't really have to worry about aiming your shots with this weapon because it has full screen coverage, so you can just focus on dodging shit. That's one of the good things about this weapon is you don't really have to try to line up your shots. So I do think it makes it a lot easier. And it does good damage pretty much to everything on screen, so I do think it's probably the best overall weapon. So just keep moving side to side as well, and just try to clear out as much as you can. The more shit you clear out, the easier it's going to be. There's some weird issue where sometimes between stage transitions, the gravity would change real fast, and I would just fall to my death. It was weird. I don't know why it would happen. It happens on a certain stage, so be aware of that. If you're dying from that, just be aware of it and be ready to switch directions really fast, and you can save yourself. Sometimes it helps to jump within those laser grids, as you saw, if it's getting too close. Because this thing moves up and down inside the laser grid, that's when it starts to get kind of tricky. Remember, though, you don't have to deal with everything on every side. Like I said, those bouncing guys can't break through the line, and they can't hurt you if you're on the other side of the line. So just remember that. Same thing with the saws. The saws can't hurt you if they're on the other side of the line. So you don't have to deal with the ones on the other side if you don't want to. You know, knowing little things like that does make it easier because you don't have to try to manage everything on the entire screen. You know, you may only have to deal with half of the screen. So that's going to make it a lot easier. It's pretty much just a matter of putting all the little details together for this final stretch. It ended up being a pretty clean run, since by this point I had died enough on this part. I think I had my first death there. The turrets definitely help. But yeah, you see that it gets pretty fucking messy, and there's really no step-by-step kind of tips that I can give on something like this, reasonably. You really have to just learn the flow of the game and the flow of these stages by this point, because they pretty much try to throw everything at you at the end. So I could see this being a, kind of a brick wall if you got this far. This could be a tough row of stages to complete to beat the game. Luckily, the last boss shouldn't give you much trouble, but this is the main challenge of the game, this whole section. The Vert is also a good shot. I probably would have kept my Blitz, but it is easy to pick up the wrong weapons on accident when you have to prioritize, either collect the wrong weapon or get hit by an enemy sometimes. So sometimes you just say, fuck it, I'll take a worse weapon just so I don't die. Sometimes you'll have to make that choice. Dashing doesn't give you invincibility from weapon pickups, unfortunately. It gives you invincibility from damage, but you can't dash through a weapon to avoid it. So sometimes there's not really a good option. You just got to kind of get a weapon you don't want. But the Vert is actually quite good. It is one of the better weapons, so it was still good enough. Just about any weapon will probably be good enough. It's going to make certain weapons are going to be harder for this part, though. Especially the ones like Laser and Flamer that slow you down. I don't like those too much. You really don't want to lose speed for this part because you can see all the shit you have to deal with here. And you really have to kind of plan ahead with your dash as well and be ready to use everything at your disposal. You got to be aware of your dash meter and your movement. And you definitely got to be a few steps ahead. See, it's very easy to die. So now I'm on my last life at this point. And near the very end, they're going to throw a bunch of shit at you all at once. It's going to get pretty dense at the very end, if I remember right. And it's kind of trying to finish you off, at the very end. It's like the final attack of the game. As you can see here, I think this is where it is, where it gets kind of fucking ridiculous. So it is some tight movement that you have to do. And that's just going to be practice and learning the stage layouts and, try to have a good weapon like the Blitz. The Blitzer is really good. Try to get the shields, but, shield only gives you so much of an advantage. They do go away fast. But now you're at the final checkpoint of the game, which is the final boss. So, if you do die on this, you got all your lives to beat this. And I found this to be very easy compared to everything else in the game. So, the later parts of the game anyway. So, just use the dodging that you've learned so far. And I ended up not dying on this on my successful attempt, so I found it to be pretty easy. The bosses do take a while. They take a lot of hits, but it's pretty simple pattern dodging by this point in the game. Just try to stay in the gaps and be ready with your dodge if you need it. this would not be my preferred weapon, but sometimes you just take whatever you can get, or you don't really have a choice. So, but I think this is the weapon that I really fucking like, is this Blitz. And like I said, once I learned about this weapon more and started using it more near the end of the game, if I were to replay the game, this would probably be the only weapon that I would be going for. I'm sure it would be great for the rest of the game, because the last parts are the hardest parts. So if it works for this shit, it'll work for the easier parts. Since by the end of the game, you have all the different enemy types pretty much coming out. So there's this gun can deal with everything. But yeah, you want to make those little micro adjustments, micro movements by tapping the D-pad, like you do with shooters. You don't want to move too far, too aggressively. Kind of like tapping movement is really good for this game, and having that dash ready as well. See, I got a shield here, so that's always helpful. I don't think I ended up losing it, but I know I didn't die at least. It does take a while, but you see the patterns aren't anything. I mean, it does get pretty dense. But keep in mind what you just had to beat to get to this boss. Those 5 stages were way fucking harder than this. So, if you got this far, then I think the boss is going to be easy for you by this point. But you see the Blitz is fucking great, because you can be all the way on the edge of the screen, not even near the boss, and you're still damaging it. So it's almost like having a homing shot. Like in a lot of games, like Gunstar Heroes for the Genesis, if you have the homing shot, you can focus just on dodging the boss and dodging the enemies, and you don't even have to aim at the boss. It's kind of like that. Even though it's not a homing shot, it covers the whole screen. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.